welcome back to another edition of the Friday Show, brought to you by the Pennsylvania Horse Breeders Association and a Stallion season auction coming up soon. Bloodstock editor Joe Nevills, tell us a little bit about that.
All right, 12th annual Stallion auction taking place January 15th through January 22nd. Over 90 seasons on offer here from states, Kentucky, Pennsylvania, New York. If you're looking for stallions, this is the place to go. Sign up at thoroughleybred.com. thoroughleybred.com.
Well, Joe and I are really pleased to have Keri Brion here from the world of steeplechasing, leading trainer in that game. Keri, welcome to the Friday Show.
Thanks for having me.
So last week we had a discussion about the Eclipse Awards. Andrew Champagne was here, and Joe and Andrew, I don't vote in the Eclipse Awards because I'm not a member of the Turf Riders Association, but Joe and Andrew both opined about steeplechasing and are among the, I think, about 10% of the voting block that abstain in this category. Joe gave his reasons, and I think a lot of other people share the sentiment. But there was a really good dialogue that happened. We got a nice letter to the editor. Steeplechase USA on Twitter had a lot of things to say, and you know, we reached out to you because we really want to have a better understanding of the game. So,
definitely.
Why should people, us included, care about steeplechase racing, even though it's not really a national sport? It's not, you know, we don't have steeplechase racing in a lot of states that have flat racing.
Yeah, I mean, look, obviously the problem of the abstaining is because you don't know much about it, which we understand that. What's so frustrating is that you don't know much about it, and there's a reason why you don't. The publicity is growing, but it's not there yet. But it is a sport. They are thoroughbreds. I mean, some people will go as far as thinking we're like out on Shetland ponies running around jumping. Like, it's not the case. These are thoroughbreds. I have dual purpose horses, which Jonathan Sheppard, my old boss, did the same, where they run on the flat and over jumps. Our season is a lot longer and a lot bigger than most people realize. We run March to November every weekend, sometimes double, triple meet weekends, but you only know about Saratoga and Far Hills and maybe Nashville. And that is a problem, but that's what I'm here to try to do. Anytime I have an opportunity to, enlighten people on what jump racing actually is and all the opportunity for horses and owners. That's anytime I have a chance to talk about it, I'd love to do so.
So to kind of go along with that discussion, then, how would you like to see sort of the sport expanded in the public consciousness? How would you like to see steeplechase grow in the public eye?
Yeah, I mean, the most important part, and what we're trying very hard, the powers that be on the inside are pushing very hard for pari-mutuel wagering in different states. Obviously, we go all up and down the East Coast, and every state has different, gambling rules and laws and stuff like that. So that's been a hard thing. But I think if the pari-mutuel wagering can go forward, that's going to bring all of you guys that much closer into paying attention. And, if you can gamble on them, it would be amazing how many people will just learn jump racing. But it is fascinating, and it's really not that much different to the flat racing, other than that there's obstacles involved. But you kind of get to learn, there's a different dynamic. You see the stats of what trainers, what horses fall, what horses don't, like what trainers have better stats sending out first timers. I mean, that's a big thing in jump racing. Who has them ready to go? Who doesn't? I mean, there's definitely an angle here that, as it grows, I think it can be, lucrative for everybody involved and get, more people involved and interested.
You're a former rider and steeplechase, and how do you overcome concerns that the sport isn't safe? You mentioned that it's like flat racing, except the horses are going over obstacles. I remember watching the Grand National on television, and they almost made it seem like because it's so dangerous, it's a great challenge. Times have changed since those days. How do you
that's true. And we don't have a Grand National here. That is an extreme. And I would say we aren't even for that here in America. That is a big thing and a big tradition in England, but we don't have anything like that here. But you're right, they do jump obstacles. We can't deny that. But what I will say is you'll find, good jumpers are good jumpers. All horses jump. It's just a matter of how good, how bad. But yes, there are falls. I can't get around that. But most of the time, those horses get up and are fine. Whereas, and I'm not comparing to, I'm a flat trainer as well. I love flat racing. I love jumping. This isn't here to be like, oh, it's worse or it's better or whatever. But a lot of times you see soft tissue issues over jumps, but you don't normally see the broken knee, the broken ankle. The injuries are not normally fatal. Sometimes they are, but they are in flat racing as well, unfortunately. I think the jumps involved just give everybody looking in, that's so dangerous. But I promise you, I'd say if you really stacked up stats properly and looked, horses fall on the flat too. You know what I mean? So it's not nearly as dangerous. These horses are taught, I'm paid to do a job, which is to teach these horses to jump, and they do, and they love it. A lot of horses get a kick out of, it spurs interest going over jumps, and they get their conditions back, and, it can be a really good thing.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that, all horses can jump. It's a matter of finding the ones that are the best at it. What is your eye on that? What do you identify for horses? In the letter that was written to us, someone actually said, steeplechase is the original, sort of second career for race horses.
Yeah.
What are you looking at for horses on the flat that makes you think I can jump that horse?
Yeah, it's changed a bit. I think even like in time, this is only going to be my third year training, but obviously I came up under Jonathan for 11 years prior to that. But it's changed a lot because the jump racing dynamics have changed. Like in Saratoga, there's no longer a last fence because they didn't want tired horses falling at the last fence up the straight. So now they sprint home almost 5/8 of a mile. Well, gone are the days of just getting the real reject flat track horses that are slow. You actually do have to have a bit of speed to you to some extent. But I'm more physical. If they run long on the turf or the dirt, that is good enough for me. And then it's just kind of the physical. Everyone's always thinking that it's a big horse you want. It's not really. I'd prefer a smaller, agile type horse to a really big, almost too big, gangly type horse. But everyone has their own preferences too. There's horses that go on to be really good jumpers that I can hold my hand up and say I never would have bought it. So, it's a little bit personal preference too.
Mm-hmm. And how is that usually brokered in sort of private deals between, when you think of the flat end, you have all the auctions and everything that you sort of do all of your exchanging. How do you acquire those horses? Is it typically private treaty? Is it?
Yeah. So, I'm a little different, whereas I've been working really hard in the last year to bring owners into the game with their horses rather than just buying the horses off of them, which has been good. I have quite a few flat owners, probably the most prominent being Madikit Stables and the Wyckoffs, Three Diamonds, and Jordan himself, have made the switch and have some jumpers with me, which is, great for people to see that you can take your horses from the flat and get their conditions back and do it over jumps as well. So I've been trying that angle, but if it is such a thing as it's not an owner that's wanting a jumper, mostly it's private deals. You want to vet these horses for the most part. They're going to have to withstand going over jumps. You want to make sure there's, some of the things you can probably get away with on the flat, don't fly over jumps. They have to be very, very sound. So most of the time it's a private deal, but, sometimes you claim off the flat and hope for the best and stuff like that too. Sometimes a private offer is going to be, how it goes. The private offer is they're going to want 20 grand more because of the claiming price. So you just go and claim it and you hope for the best.
So you mentioned working for Jonathan Sheppard, the Hall of Fame trainer who trained jumps. And of course he had a lot of good horses on the flat, including Stormcat as a 2-year-old who went on to remarkable career at stud. Tell us a little bit how you got involved. I kind of kiddingly said you count the number of seconds and thirds and fourths in somebody's name in the people, that it's a game with a lot of tradition and families that have been in it for generations. You didn't come to the game that way. Tell us your story.
I would definitely, I'd say be unique, especially to the jump racing world. My family had nothing to do with horses, not interested whatsoever. I don't know. I had the little pony bug from the time I was 5 years old and started taking riding lessons. And I actually started working for Ronnie and Betsy Houghton of Sylmar Farm when I was 10 years old. They were right down the road from where I grew up. So I worked for them for 8 years through high school. I learned to gallop there and knew it was always going to be racehorses. And I went to college on a pole vaulting scholarship, but I did not stay sound. I would not be a very good racehorse. So I came home and finished college at Westchester. And that's when I started. One of my good friends at the time was working for Jonathan Sheppard and said, why don't you just come get on horses? And I didn't realize at the time that there were other horses in the world other than your PA bred allowance horses and down the claiming ranks. So I went into Jonathan's Win Informed Decision and Forever Together, we're running in the Breeders' Cup, and realized that there's a whole nother world to all of this. And it started there. I think that was 2009, maybe 2010.
Something in that neighborhood, yeah.
Something like that. So anyway, I started for just being a rider for Jonathan, and I had no interest in jump racing whatsoever. I was all about the flat, and that was all I wanted to do, all I cared about. And in typical Jonathan fashion, one day I was out in a field galloping around with a couple jumpers, and I was on a jumper, I suppose. And he said, "Oh, follow them up over the hurdles." And like I had jumped like show riding and stuff, but never anything like that. And up we went, because you don't say no to Jonathan. Yeah. And I jumped 3 hurdles, and it was just that day. This is so cool. Like, I want to do this. And that was kind of the start of it. And I wanted to be a rider. I never wanted to be champion jockey or anything. I always wanted to train. It just was something to have on the resume. So I rode pretty regularly for 4 years. And then as Jonathan his health started to decline a bit, and he started to take a little bit of a step back, and he gave me a lot more responsibility and opportunity on the training end. That was when I decided. I had a fall at Nashville, nothing bad, broke my collarbone and my wrist, and I called it a riding career.
Nothing bad.
Nothing bad. No. Called it a riding career, jockey career. And that's when I kind of got more into the training side of things. And when he retired, his 4 main owners that I had gotten a very good relationship with came with me. So
what are some of the most important things you learned from Jonathan?
Oh, I mean, we could be here all day, but probably, he was so incredibly patient, and he really treated them like horses. And I've seen so many horses, like, we're at Fair Hill, they all get turned out before they get ridden. And you think of it and you're like, does that really make that much of a difference? But I'm telling you, it does. Like, just having that bit of, he used to turn out Informed Decision, Forever Together, Fantasia, and Rainbow View in a field together every morning. And it was the $1 million field. And you just looked out there like, oh my God, but he just did it. And, I'm sure horses definitely got hurt, probably had paddock accidents, throughout the years, but they're happy horses. And he really developed some really good horses into just, treating them that way. So I tried to adapt that side of things as best as I can.
Mm-hmm. So Jonathan Sheppard trained over both flat and the jumps. You also train over the flat and the jumps. How does preparing the horse for one or the other, aside from the obvious that one's going over jumps, how does your preparation for a horse sort of differ between the two, and how are they similar?
Right. So obviously, you have the jumping side of things where you teach them to jump, but take that out of it. So I don't really train them that much different, especially nowadays with the speed that is required. You have to have a fast enough horse to sprint home in Saratoga and whatnot. So, they might have one day a week where we might do a 2-mile gallop, whereas my flat horses wouldn't be doing that. But for the most part, they're doing the same type of things that my flat horses do. We might do an extra hill out back at Fair Hill, or, we might go for a longer jog or stuff like that. But honestly, for the most part, like they work 5/8 or 3/4 on the Tapeta at Fair Hill. You can see all their works. I publish them, up to the big races. They don't work, and they really, like, the Mean Queen would work faster than most of my flat horses. So it's not really, it's not a big thing. We might start our works a little bit slower on the jumpers than you would on the flat horses. They might go off in 15 rather than a 13, but you got to keep the speed into them. And what I have learned is now it's a work in progress. Jordan Wyckoff and I have been trying to work on getting horses to do both. And the one thing I've learned after they have gone jumping, you do have to put a bit more of that early speed back into them. So I'll take them back and break them out of the gate once and give them a real sharp 3 out of the gate and just kind of get them back, because there's no gate on flat racing and they break away slow enough and whatnot. But I think you can do both. It's just making sure horse to horse you train them the right way. But it's a great opportunity, and you have the conditions go both ways. Like you have your flat conditions and your jump conditions, and they don't coincide. So,
so I'm going to use. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
From an age standpoint, when does a steeplechase horse sort of hit the prime of its?
I think that is a very horse to horse type question to answer. Like you have Snap Decision, who will probably win the Eclipse Award this year. If that's who should win the Eclipse Award, in my opinion. And he, has been very good for quite a long time. He came off the flat with Shug McGahee and went jumping. And, he had a up and down year this year, but still some very, very good 2 grade 1 wins. And he's turning 9, I believe. He's 8 turning 9. I would say it's normally 7 to 8. They're at that grade 1 level. If they're going to be that level, normally that, but then it just kind of depends. Like you bring horses over from Ireland, and I mean, Baltimore Bucko and the Mean Queen were grade 1 winners at the age of 5. So it really, I think, just depends on the horse and how you choose to campaign them, and how quick you go through your conditions over jumps and, when you hit that level. But yeah, I mean, I think it's normally from 6 to 8 really is probably when they're the best.
So I'm going to take this opportunity to educate myself, and I'm just going to sort of rapid fire you just steeplechase questions here.
Okay.
One of the big things that has held me back in voting is that I'm not really that familiar with the hierarchy of the top races. On the flat end, there are grade 1s, and then there are grade 1s, like all capital letters. So can you give me a little bit of a rundown on, which are the races that the steeplechase folks really, really want to win? What's kind of the top ones, and then second level, and then kind of down?
Right. So there are only 5 grade 1s on our circuit. So those 5 grade 1s are very important. So for instance, Snap has won 2 grade 1s. That right there in itself, it's a big deal. Now you have Hewitt, who came over and ran in one race in America. That was the Grand National. That purse is the biggest purse we have to offer. That isn't necessarily the best, the best race. It's a great race. It's a grade 1. It's a great race to win. But, Nashville, then you have Saratoga. If you have a horse that can win at a hunt meet, which would be considered Nashville or Far Hills, which means up and down hills, but can also go to Saratoga and win, on a flat track, speedy, 5/8 of a mile home. If they can do both, which Snap Decision and the Mean Queen both did, in my opinion, that shows that's a big deal. They can run on all kinds of tracks. You have your flat track jump horses and you have your hunt meet jump horses. And then every once in a while you have just a superstar that can do it on all. And for jump racing, I think that's a big deal. If you see a horse that can run on a hunt meet grade 1 and win a Saratoga grade 1 or Belmont grade 1, wherever we are, because the racetracks to the hunt meets are very different.
So yeah, that actually helps me a lot. I've got the contender past performances right here. I've sort of been just looking at the races and seeing how everything kind of compares and contrasts. That's very helpful.
Because Hewitt, who won the American Grand National this year, came over. I don't know that you would have seen the same Hewitt around a flat, fast track, going 2 miles or 2 1/16. That's the thing that I find just so incredible with Snap Decision. Aside from carrying all the weight he did in the Jonathan Sheppard going 2-3, he also won the Iroquois going 3 miles on level weights. And the Mean Queen won the American Grand National at Far Hills and also won 2 grade 1s in Saratoga and Belmont. Those are just special, very good horses.
So on the very simplest of terms, people, I'm sure there are a lot of trainers out there who would say, if I went for the rest of the year, if I won the Kentucky Derby, I'd be doing all right. Is there that one race for steeplechase? Is that the Grand National? Like, is that the sort of, if I do nothing else this year, if I do that?
Yeah, that's interesting. It's a funny one, probably. But then you have Saratoga is such a historical place for jump racing. So I think that a lot of trainers could counter and say, no, winning one of the grade ones in Saratoga, the Smithwick, or now it was the Turf Riders, it's now the Jonathan Sheppard, it would be a toss-up, I think. Saratoga is such a historical place for jump racing, and it's magical. People love to win up there, too. For me now, it's the Iroquois, because I've never won it.
There you go.
But
the biggest race to win is the next one.
It's the next one. I've won 4 of the 5 grade ones, and that's the one I haven't. So that for me, that's the one. But yeah, it's definitely probably the Grand National or Saratoga. It's nothing like winning in Saratoga, no matter what. I think a maiden 25 claimer on the flat winning at Saratoga is great. Saratoga,
Yeah. And that helps a lot. That's one of the things I struggle with is that, sometimes there's a year where there's a horse that won 2 grade ones and everyone else won 1 grade one. Great.
Right.
We have an obvious thing there, but then I have a bunch of other horses that have won 1. And it's hard to kind of figure out what the hierarchy is, like who should get in, who shouldn't get in.
Exactly. And that's what, and this is the problem. I mean, this is why people abstain, and I don't blame you. It's like, how do you know? And that's where it's like, somehow this needs to become a thing where you get it a bit. I mean, also the grade ones in Saratoga and Belmont, which was Aqueduct this year,
right?
Those are handicaps. So there are horses that might win that grade one, but they were carrying 139 pounds or 140 pounds. And then there's other horses carrying 158 and they win. But then you're like, well, okay. But then on level weights, they finish 8th. So, the Nashville and Far Hills are level weights and the grade ones in the summer are handicaps. So, that's another thing.
Well, that's very helpful.
Keri, I really appreciate you coming on the show. I know I've learned a lot. I think Joe learned a lot. I think if we had you on the show a few weeks ago, we maybe
would have voted.
We'd have fewer abstentions.
No, I think this is good. I mean, I know everyone got a little wound up, but I actually think if this is what came of it, I think it's great.
Oh no, it is, and I've learned a lot, and I'm going to have a different attitude toward steeplechase racing going forward. And I hope that a track in Kentucky that was actually built as a steeplechase track in the late 1980s, I think it was called Dueling Grounds at the time. They have no jump racing there. They have a lot of turf racing only. I hope that maybe one day we'll have a steeplechase race there, and I'll be there to watch it.
Yeah.
Great if they would take jump racing back. We had a big race there years and years ago, before my time anyway. But I think it's a course that's made for jump racing, and we could put on a really good show out there for sure.
Or at the very least, make it a short drive for us and go to High Hope in Lexington at the Kentucky Horse Park.
Let's go back there. I want to race there as a jockey. Exactly. Let's get back there. And yeah. So look, we're looking. It's a hard one. I mean, putting on a race meet is not an easy task, and credit to all of our race meets that do it. It's a big day, but they're great days. They're fun days. It's a great party, and enjoy your horses running or just enjoy watching it. So hopefully we can get back to Kentucky, either Kentucky Downs or High Hope or both.
Well, just down the road from Kentucky Downs is one of the biggest races of the year, right? Where 50 or 60,000 people show up.
Exactly. I mean, the Iroquois is just absolutely incredible. It's my favorite race meeting by far of the whole year. I actually won my first race as a jockey there, and it's just always a great time. It's like our Breeders' Cup almost, honestly, the best go. And it's just, they know how to put on a show, and they get a massive crowd, like you said, 50 or 60,000 people, and it's a great time. So no, there's a lot of hidden gems in our sport, believe it or not.
Well, thank you once again. We really appreciate you joining us, and thanks to the Pennsylvania Horse Breeders Association for their sponsorship of the Friday show. And we'll see you next week.
Support award-winning independent horse industry journalism and become a Paulick Report Insider on Patreon. For as little as $5 a month, insiders get access to exclusive Q&As with Paulick Report staff, insight behind our editorial process, exclusive opinions and on-site analysis, Paulick Report merch, and more. This is not a paywall. The website you know and love will always be the same. But if you want more, and you want to make our coverage even better, visit patreon.com/PaulickReport and become a Paulick Report Insider today.